I want you to try a little mental exercise with me for a second. Go ahead and close your eyes. Well, unless you're driving, of course. Please don't do that. But try to picture the timeline of human history.
Hmm.
Not, the dates and names you had to memorize to pass a test in high school, but the actual feeling of it. If you were watching a movie of the last 10,000 years on fast forward, what would the plot even look like?
Well, if we're being honest, it would probably look like a complete disaster movie. Or, I don't know, maybe a slasher film.
Exactly. It just feels like absolute chaos. You see these empires rising up, they dominate for a little while, and then they just collapse into dust. You see armies smashing into each other, plagues wiping out entire cities, revolutions, counter-revolutions. It just feels random.
Yeah, a random series of really unfortunate events. Just one thing after another, with no real direction or purpose.
Right. Sound and fury signifying nothing. But here's the massive question, the one we're really going to wrestle with in this deep dive. Is that chaos actually real? Or is it just a trick of perspective?
And that is the key, isn't it? Perspective.
Because the source material we're diving into today suggests that history actually does have a direction, that there is an arrow of history, and if you know how to look for it, a relentless, almost undeniable pattern starts to emerge from all that noise.
It's all about where you place the camera, so to speak. The source makes this brilliant distinction between what it calls the bird's eye view and something more like a spy satellite view.
I love this analogy. Let's really set the stage with this because I think it frames everything else we're going to talk about. So what's the difference?
Okay, so the bird's eye view is how we traditionally study history, right? We look at decades, maybe a few centuries at a time. We study the modern era or the Middle Ages.
The usual chunks?
The usual chunks, yeah. And when you look at that scale, history looks like a jagged line. It moves forward, then it moves backward.
Yeah.
The Roman Empire brings order, and then boom, it collapses and everything falls apart. Christianity unifies Europe for a bit, then it splinters into 1,000 fighting sects.
One step forward, two steps back. It looks like we're just moving in circles, making the same mistakes over and over.
Precisely, like a jagged saw blade. But the source argues we need to zoom out, way out. We need that view from a cosmic spy satellite that doesn't just scan centuries, but scans millennia.
So we're talking about looking at the last, 10, 15,000 years in a single sweep?
Exactly. And when you look at that scale, all the zigzagging, it just disappears. The randomness kind of vanishes. And you see this single inexorable trend.
Which is unity.
Relentless unity.
Yeah.
History is the story of thousands of isolated, tiny human worlds all collapsing and merging into one single global sphere.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace that arrow. We're going to try and figure out how we got from thousands of separate tribes to one global civilization. And to do that, we're going to unpack three huge pillars from the research.
It's a great roadmap.
Yeah.
And the first one, well, it's about the engine of change. And this is really counterintuitive, I think, because we usually imagine a strong culture as being, peaceful and consistent.
Right, stable.
But the research says the complete opposite. The real engine of history is contradiction.
So it's the internal fights that actually keep a culture alive? I have to say, that makes me feel a lot better about how argumentative everyone is on the internet.
It puts it in a certain perspective. Then second, we're going to watch what the source calls the great swallowing. We're going to look at the physical consolidation of the planet, how we literally went from having distinct, almost alien worlds on Earth to just one.
And finally, and this is the fun one, we're going to bust a massive myth, the myth of authentic culture. We are probably going to ruin your favorite Italian restaurant for you.
We might upset a few foodies, that's true, but it proves such a vital point about who we are.
Okay, let's jump right into this first pillar then. The engine of culture. Now, the source starts by defining culture in a way I hadn't really thought about before. It calls culture a network of artificial instincts.
It's a sticky phrase, isn't it? Artificial instinct. It helps to think about the biology for a second. If you look at social animals, ants, bees, whatever their cooperation is, well, it's hard-coded. It's in their DNA.
A worker bee doesn't need a manifesto.
No, it doesn't need a constitution to know it should die for the hive. It doesn't need a police force to keep it in line. Biology does all the heavy lifting.
But humans are different. You put 1 million humans in a small space without any rules and you don't get a perfect hive, you get a riot.
Right. And when the agricultural revolution hit around 10,000 BC, you suddenly had humans living together in these massive numbers. Towns, then cities, eventually entire empires. Millions of strangers who all needed to cooperate somehow.
And our biology isn't built for that. Our programming is for small tribal groups. What is it, Dunbar's number? About 150 people.
That's the one. So to scale up, we basically had to invent software to run on top of our biological hardware.
And that software is culture.
Exactly. Myths, laws, norms, gods, money, these are all artificial instincts. They allow millions of people who have never even met to play by the same set of rules. They tell us who to trust, who to marry, who to kill, and who to obey.
But here's the trap I think a lot of us fall into. We tend to view these cultures as these, I don't know, solid, monolithic blocks. Like, this is ancient Egyptian culture, and it's just this static thing. A planet, it just sits there, it spins, it's stable. It doesn't really change unless, an asteroid hits it or Alexander the Great invades.
Any of that was actually the academic consensus for a long time. In the early 20th century, anthropologists really did treat cultures like isolated ecosystems, or like planets orbiting the sun. They were seen as these complete harmonious systems.
So the assumption was, if you left a culture alone on a remote island and the environment didn't change, the culture would just stay the same forever, like a fly in amber.
That was the idea, yeah.
Yeah.
But our source says that's dead wrong. It's completely wrong. Today, we understand that cultures are in a state of constant flux, and not just because of invasions or climate change. Even if you have a totally isolated culture in a perfectly stable environment, it will still change. It'll evolve because of its internal dynamics. Because the system is built on contradictions.
That's the key insight.
It's everything. You see, unlike the laws of physics, which are always consistent, gravity doesn't argue with thermodynamics, every single man-made order is packed with internal contradictions, tensions, incompatible values. And the constant effort to resolve those tensions, or just live with them, is what drives history forward.
There's a great quote from the source on this, something like, "Consistency is the playground of dull minds."
It's a bit harsh, but it's accurate in this context. If a culture were perfectly consistent, there would be no reason to change anything at all. It would be totally static. It's the friction that creates the heat, and it's the heat that creates the movement.
Let's make this really concrete, because cognitive dissonance can sound a bit, abstract and academic. The source gives this incredible example of a medieval nobleman in Europe. This really painted a vivid picture for me, because we think of the Middle Ages as this very rigid, pious time, but the mindset inside someone's head was just incredibly chaotic.
It was a psychological battlefield. Just think about the two main value systems a nobleman in, say, the 12th century had to subscribe to. On one hand, he's a Christian, a devout Catholic.
The first pillar of his life.
And on the other hand, he's a member of the chivalric order. He's a knight.
So let's walk through his day. How do these two things just smash into each other?
Okay, so picture this. It's a Tuesday morning, 1180 AD. Our count goes to church. He's sitting there in his pew, surrounded by all this religious iconography, smelling the incense. The priest is up in the pulpit, reading from the scriptures. And what's the message?
Vanity of vanities, all is vanity.
Exactly. The priest is telling him that riches are a trap, that lust and honor and pride are all temptations of the devil.
Right. Turn the other cheek. The meek shall inherit the earth. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. It's a message of extreme pacifism and humility.
Extreme. If someone hits you, let them hit you again. Do not resist evil. The count is sitting there, he's nodding, and he sincerely believes this is the supreme truth of the universe. He's terrified of hell. He really wants to be a good Christian. He feels guilty about his wealth and his castle.
And then the sun goes down.
Then the sun goes down. He changes out of his church clothes into his finest silks, the very silks the priest just told him were vanity, and he goes to a huge banquet at the Lord's castle. And suddenly the entire script just flips completely. The wine is flowing, the minstrels are singing, and what are they singing about?
They're definitely not singing about being meek.
Not at all. They're singing about Lancelot and Guinevere. They're singing about Achilles. They're telling these bloody war stories. The values in this room are, it is better to die than to live with shame. If someone insults your honor, you must demand satisfaction.
Usually at the point of a sword.
Right. The message is, wealth is glory. To be poor is to be nothing. So in the morning, it's turn the other cheek. In the evening, it's stab the guy who insulted your family.
And he believes in both. That's the crazy part.
He believes in both. That is the contradiction. That is the cognitive dissonance. If he really followed Jesus to the letter, he'd give away his castle, break his sword, and go become a monk.
And if he really followed Lancelot, he'd just ignore the church entirely and go pillage the countryside.
But he tries to be both. He lives in that tension. And the source argues that this isn't some glitch in the system. This isn't just this count being a hypocrite. This is the feature. This tension is what forced the entire culture to evolve.
Right, because the human mind can't just sit with that forever. It's uncomfortable. It creates this anxiety, so you try to reconcile it. You try to build some kind of bridge between these two opposing values.
And that attempt to reconcile Christianity with chivalry gave us the Crusades.
Which is wild to think about. The Crusades were basically a massive continent-wide cultural therapy session.
In a structural sense, yes.
Oh.
It was an attempt to mesh the ideals. The Crusaders tried to prove you could be a good Christian and a good knight at the exact same time. I will kill, but I will kill for God.
The Knights Templar are the ultimate expression of this, right? The monk warriors.
Absolutely. They were trying to solve the cultural equation. So you see, the internal conflict created this massive external event in history. If the culture had been purely Christian, there would be no Crusades. If it had been purely chivalric, maybe just a bunch of local wars. The combination created a global phenomenon.
Now, lest we think this is just some quirky medieval problem, the source points out that we are dealing with the exact same thing right now. We are not immune to this at all.
Not in the slightest. The modern world is built on a massive contradiction that we still haven't come close to solving.
And if future historians look back at us, they'll see that we are torn between two values that are just as incompatible as Christianity and chivalry were.
And that is the fundamental tension between equality and individual freedom.
We love to say those words together, don't we? Liberty and equality, like they're best friends. Like peanut butter and jelly. It's the slogan of the French Revolution. It's baked into all of our foundational documents.
But they are, at a structural level, allergic to each other. I mean, just think about the mechanics of it. If you want to ensure perfect equality, you almost always have to curtail the freedom of those who are better off.
You have to tax the rich to feed the poor.
You have to regulate outcomes so the strong don't completely dominate the weak. Every single step toward an enforced equality is, by definition, a step away from absolute individual freedom.
But if you go the other way, if you want to maximize individual freedom, let everyone do exactly what they want with their money and their time, let the market decide everything, then inequality inevitably explodes.
That is the dilemma.
Yeah.
Because people just aren't the same. We have different skills, we have different starting points in life, different luck. If you leave everyone entirely free to their own devices, that gap just widens and widens.
So you could argue that the entire political history of the world since the French Revolution in 1789 has just been people trying to solve this one puzzle.
The source breaks this down into a spectrum, which I think is really, really helpful. Look at the 19th century. You had these liberal regimes. Think of the world in a Charles Dickens novel. They prioritized individual freedom above almost everything else.
So if you're a factory owner, you're free to make millions.
Yeah.
But if you're an orphan on the street, you're free to starve or pickpocket.
Right. Massive inequality, but a high degree of freedom for the individual to succeed or fail on their own. Then, of course, the pendulum swings.
Yeah.
You get communism in the 20th century. The ideal there was total, absolute equality.
And the cost of that was total tyranny. Zero freedom.
Exactly. And even today, right now, in contemporary American politics, this is the fundamental divide. It isn't just red versus blue for the sake of being on different teams. It's a philosophical disagreement about freedom versus equality. Democrats, generally speaking, tend to lean toward the equality side of the equation, raising taxes to fund health care, helping the poor and elderly, creating social safety nets.
Which, a critic would say, infringes on my freedom to spend my money how I want or run my business how I choose.
Correct. And Republicans, again, generally speaking, tend to lean toward maximizing individual freedom over taxes, less regulation, smaller government.
Which, a critic would say, means the gap between the rich and poor gets wider, and some people just can't afford things like health care.
And the crucial insight here, and this is where the source material is very neutral and analytical, is that neither side is wrong in a purely logical sense. They are just prioritizing different sides of an unresolvable cultural contradiction.
We haven't solved it because it can't be solved.
And the source would say that's a good thing, that friction is what keeps our political conversation dynamic. It forces us to criticize, to reevaluate our positions, to invent new policies. If we ever solved it, history would just stop. We'd basically be ants.
That's a powerful reframing. Next time I'm doom scrolling through political arguments online, I'll try to tell myself, this is just the engine of history revving up.
It might help the blood pressure a little bit.
So, contradiction is the fuel. But now let's look at the movement of the vehicle itself. Let's talk about the Great Swallowing. This brings us right back to that spy satellite view we mentioned at the start.
Right. We've established why cultures change internally, that cognitive dissonance engine. Now let's zoom out and look at how they all merged on a global scale.
The source asks us to imagine the Earth not as a single planet, but as a galaxy, which is such a cool mental image. Instead of planets and stars floating in space, you imagine these isolated human worlds floating on the surface of the Earth.
It's really the most accurate way to visualize the deep past. If you go back to 10,000 BC, right at the dawn of the agricultural revolution, our planet contained literally thousands of distinct human worlds.
And when you say distinct, we mean they had absolutely no clue that the others even existed.
Zero. None. They were their own universes. They had their own unique ecosystems, their own gods, their own politics. They might suspect there were some other people over the mountains, but for all intents and purposes, their known world ended at the horizon.
The best example of this, and honestly this one kind of blew my mind, is Tasmania. I think we just tend to forget how incredibly isolated some parts of the world were for so long.
The Tasmanian example is both tragic and just fascinating. So Tasmania, it's an island just south of Australia. Around 10,000 BC, the Ice Age ends, the glaciers melt, and sea levels rise. And the land bridge that connected Tasmania to Australia gets submerged.
And the people who are on that island are suddenly trapped.
Completely cut off for
Yeah.
12,000 years.
12,000 years. That is so hard to even process. That's longer than all of recorded history.
It's an eternity. I mean, think about everything that happened in the rest of the world during that time. The agricultural revolution, empires rising and falling, philosophy was invented, the pyramids were built, the Great Wall of China, Rome, the Vikings, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam. The Tasmanians knew none of it, and nobody in the world knew they were there.
The source says that to an emperor in China at the time, Tasmania might as well have been on one of Jupiter's moons.
It was a truly alien world right here on Earth. And that's just one example. In 10,000 BC, there were thousands of these pockets. But that arrow of history, it points toward unity. So by 2000 BC, those thousands had already dwindled down to just hundreds.
And by 1450 AD, so right before the European age of exploration really kicks off, the numbers had dropped even more drastically.
Right, yeah. By 1450, we can identify 5 distinct human worlds left on the planet. That's it, just 5.
Okay, let's list them, because this really sets the stage for the modern world we live in now.
Well, the big one, the giant, is the Afro-Asian world. That's basically Europe, Asia, and most of Africa, all loosely connected. That contained about 90% of humanity.
So they were all connected by trade and travel. A disease could, in theory, travel from London to Beijing. Ideas could travel.
Exactly, so that's the big one. Then you had the 4 smaller, isolated worlds. There was the Mesoamerican world, so think the Aztecs and Mayans in Central America and Mexico.
Okay.
You had the Andean world, the Incas, basically, in Western South America. You had the Australian world, the Aboriginal continent, and finally the Oceanic world, all the way from Hawaii to New Zealand, the Pacific Islands.
5 separate worlds, that's 1450, and
Right.
then the swallowing begins.
And it happened with just terrifying speed. In a span of about 300 years, that Afro-Asian giant just opened its mouth and consumed the other 4.
It's like a geopolitical Pac-Man.
It really is. It starts in 1521. The Spanish, led by Cortez, conquer the Aztecs. The Mesoamerican world is swallowed.
Gone. Absorbed into the Afro-Asian sphere.
Then just a decade later, 1532, Pizarro and the Spanish crush the Incas. The Andean world is swallowed.
Then the focus shifts to the Pacific.
Right. Fast forward to 1788, British colonization begins in Australia. That world effectively ends. And then finally, in 1803, the British establish a penal colony in Tasmania. The last autonomous human world on planet Earth is absorbed.
And just like that, for the first time in history, we don't have a galaxy of separate worlds anymore. We have one.
We have a single global system. And I think it's really important to clarify what we mean by unity here. Because when listeners hear global unity, they might be thinking we're talking about everyone holding hands and singing Kumbaya or something.
Right. It sounds like we're saying everyone is the same now, or that it's all peaceful. And obviously, you just have to look at the news for 5 seconds to know the world is not peaceful.
Not at all. Unity doesn't mean homogeneity. It doesn't mean we all like each other or agree. It means we are all part of the same operating system.
The source makes a great point about enemies here. It says something like, even when nations fight, they speak the same language.
Exactly. Look at the U.S. and Iran, or any major geopolitical rivals today. They might hate each other, they might threaten war, but look at how they fight. They are arguing over the concept of nation states. They use capitalist economics or reactions to it. They appeal to international law. They both believe in the same laws of nuclear physics.
Right. Iran isn't trying to defeat the U.S. using, I don't know, ancient sorcery or by appealing to rules from a completely different reality. They're trying to enrich uranium using the exact same periodic table that the Americans use.
There are no alien politics anymore. If the Tasmanians had met the Chinese emperor in 1000 AD, they would have had absolutely no common ground, no shared concepts about anything. Today, there's no place like that left. We are all, for better or worse, inside that Afro-Asian stomach.
Which leads us perfectly to the third pillar. And this is the one that really challenges how we see ourselves today. We love this word, authentic.
Oh, it's the ultimate marketing buzzword, isn't it? Authentic cuisine, authentic travel, authentic culture. We crave it. We want the real deal,
Yeah.
untouched by the modern globalized world.
But the view from our source is that's a myth. Or at least the way we use that word is a myth.
Well, it really depends on your definition. If authentic means something that developed completely independently, with ancient roots, free of any outside influence, then there are basically no authentic cultures left on Earth.
Because of the swallowing.
Because of the swallowing.
Yeah.
Everything has been mixed and blended together. And the best way to see this, and probably the most fun way, is to just look at food.
Okay, let's ruin some dinner plans. I feel like I need to apologize in advance to any Italian grandmothers who might be listening right now.
They might come after us with their wooden spoons.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it. Think about your classic Italian restaurant. What is the most quintessential Italian dish you can imagine?
Oh, spaghetti with tomato sauce, a nice marinara. It feels eternal. You can picture Julius Caesar eating it. You imagine Dante Alighieri twirling pasta while he's writing the Inferno.
It's a beautiful image. But it's completely impossible because tomatoes are from Mexico. They were first domesticated by the people of the Mesoamerican world. They didn't even reach Italy until the Spaniards brought them back in the 1500s. And forks weren't really a thing in Caesar's time either.
So the authentic Italian meal is actually a fusion dish that's only a few centuries old.
That's it.
Okay, my mind is a little blown. Surely Indian food is safer. I love a good spicy vindaloo. That heat, that spice, it feels ancient.
That spice, that heat, it defines Indian cuisine for most of us. But chili peppers, also Mexican. They are native to the Americas.
Wait, what? So ancient Indian food wasn't spicy?
Not in the way we think of it today, no. They had things like black pepper and ginger, but they did not have chilies. The Buddha never tasted a chili pepper. He never experienced that specific kind of heat. It just didn't exist in the Afro-Asian world until after the global consolidation.
And it just goes on, doesn't it? Swiss chocolate?
Cocoa is Mexican. William Tell never tasted chocolate.
Argentine steak?
The cattle are from the Afro-Asian world. In 1492, the only steak you could get in Argentina was llama meat.
And potatoes.
Yeah.
That's like the soul of Irish and Polish cooking.
They're native to the Andes Mountains in South America. They only got to Europe about 400 years ago.
So when you go to an authentic restaurant, what you're really eating is the delicious results of 16th century globalization.
You're eating history, but it goes deeper than just food. It changes our entire picture of history itself. The source brings up the image of the Native American horseman.
Oh, this is a big one. When we think of the Great Plains, the Sioux, the Apache, the Comanche, we have this very powerful cinematic image of the warrior on horseback, riding across the plains. It feels like this ancient, timeless tradition.
It's the iconic Hollywood image for sure. But horses are not native to the Americas, not in human history anyway. They went extinct there thousands of years before humans arrived in large numbers. There were 0 horses there in 1491.
They came over with the Spanish.
They came with the Spanish conquistadors. Some of them escaped, they bred in the wild, and they gradually moved north across the continent. And the Native American tribes adopted them.
So that whole culture of the master horseman.
It was formed in the 17th and 18th centuries. It was a massive revolution. I mean, the arrival of the horse changed absolutely everything for the Plains tribes. How they hunted buffalo, how they fought their wars, how they traveled. But it was a new culture created by the collision of these two previously separate worlds.
And the source is very clear this doesn't make it fake.
No, and that's the crucial point. It isn't fake at all. It was deeply meaningful to the people who lived it. It was heroic, it was beautiful, but it wasn't ancient. It wasn't pure in the sense of being isolated and untouched. It was a dynamic product of global change.
It really forces you to accept that change is the only constant. Maybe authenticity isn't about purity, maybe it's about how you adapt and create something new.
Precisely. Every single culture we see in the world today is a mongrel culture, as the source puts it. We are all fusion.
So we've established that history is moving toward unity. We've established that we're all mixed up together now. But I really want to get to the why. Why did this happen? We talked about biology earlier. Biology didn't program us for this global village, did it?
No. In fact, biology programmed us for the exact opposite. And this brings us to the fourth and final segment of our dive today, the three unifiers.
Okay, so let's get into this evolutionary us versus them mindset.
Right. If you look at pretty much any other social animal, chimpanzees, wolves, you name it, they are strictly us versus them. A chimpanzee cares about its own troop. It does not care about chimpanzee interests on a global scale. You will never see a chimp lobbying for the rights of chimps in another forest.
Or worker bees of the world uniting?
Right. They will fight to the death against the neighboring hive, no questions asked. And for most of our history, humans were wired the same way. Us was just the people in our little tribe, our little valley. Everyone else was them. They were barbarians, aliens, maybe not even fully human in our eyes.
So how did we break out of that? How do we get to the point where I can actually care about a disaster happening on the other side of the planet? Or trust someone I've never met enough to trade with them?
The source identifies this massive cognitive shift that happened around the first millennium BC. So around 1000 BC or so.
What changed?
Three specific types of people appeared on the scene who started seeing the world in a fundamentally different way. They didn't just see us versus them. They saw a potential universal us. They developed these grand universal orders that could, in theory, encompass the entire world.
And these are the three unifiers.
The economic order, the political order, and the religious order. Or, to put it more simply, the merchant, the conqueror, and the prophet.
Let's break those down. The conqueror seems pretty obvious. We're talking about empires.
Exactly, the imperial order. For a great conqueror like Alexander or Caesar, the whole world is a single potential empire. Their vision is, we can rule everyone. It's often violent and brutal, but it forces unity. It smashes different tribes together and makes them all follow the same set of laws.
Okay, and the prophet?
That's the universal religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. You know, before this shift, most religions were very local. You had a god of your rock or your river. But for a prophet, the whole world holds a single universal truth. Everyone is a potential believer. The vision is, we can save everyone.
But the source seems particularly fascinated by that first one, the merchant.
Money, the economic order. For the merchant, the entire world is just one single market. Everyone is a potential customer.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. We tend to think of money as, the root of all evil, but the source makes this powerful argument that money actually succeeded where gods and kings failed.
It's arguably the most successful unifier in all of human history. Just think about it. Religion tends to divide people just as much as it unites them, right? If I believe in God A and you believe in God B, we might very well kill each other over it. We've seen that happen for centuries.
And empires always crumble. People rebel against the emperor. They don't want to be ruled by some foreigner from a distant capital.
But money. Money crosses the trenches. It doesn't care about those divisions. The source uses a very provocative but very powerful example. Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, this one really stopped me in my tracks. It's a controversial example, but it proves the point so perfectly.
Here's a man who absolutely hated American culture. He hated American religion. He hated American politics. He dedicated his entire life to fighting them. In his worldview, the U.S. was the great Satan. But he was apparently very fond of American dollars.
He didn't have a problem with the currency.
Not at all. His organization used dollars. They trusted the value of the dollar. And that is the unique power of money. It requires no shared face, no shared king, no shared language. It relies on a foundation of pure economic trust. It bridges the divide between bitter enemies in a way that nothing else really can.
It's the ultimate language of that single global system we were talking about earlier.
It is. When you and I agree to trade using this piece of paper or this shiny metal, we are acknowledging that the other person is part of our system. We are validating them. Money is the most tolerant conqueror of all because it doesn't care what god you pray to as long as the crane has the right weight.
That is strangely cynical and also kind of hopeful at the same time. It's like saying, we might hate each other's guts, but hey, we both love gold, so I guess we can talk.
That's history for you. It's rarely a fairy tale. It's very, very practical.
So let's bring this all home. We started this deep dive by asking if history has a direction, if it's all just random chaos, or if there's a real pattern there.
And the view from that spy satellite seems to confirm it. There is a pattern. We are moving from thousands of isolated alien worlds like Tasmania toward a single, messy, contradictory, but unified global system.
And the fuel for that journey, the engine, isn't peace and harmony, it's friction. It's that cognitive dissonance of the medieval knight trying to be a good Christian and the modern voter trying to balance the ideals of freedom and equality.
It's the tension that forces us to constantly invent new ways to live together.
So for you, the listener, the next time you feel that tension, maybe you're arguing about politics at Thanksgiving, or you feel personally torn between two competing values in your own life, just remember that you aren't witnessing the collapse of the system.
You're experiencing the engine of history, that frustration you feel. That's the sound of the culture evolving.
And also remember, your authentic dinner might actually be a 500-year-old fusion experiment.
And you should definitely enjoy it anyway. It probably tastes even better when you know the history behind it.
Before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about those three unifiers: money, empires, and religion. Now, we usually think of these as the villains of history, don't we? Imperialism is bad. Greed is bad. Religious intolerance is bad. And, well, often they are.
But the source suggests that without these three villains, we would likely still be stuck in that evolutionary us versus them mindset. We might still be living in isolated tribes, viewing everyone over the next hill as subhuman.
And specifically, think about the merchant. We criticize consumerism and global capitalism all the time, and for many good reasons. But just ask yourself this. Why is money the only force in human history that can get a devout Christian, a devout Muslim, a staunch atheist, and a Buddhist monk to all agree in the value of a single piece of paper without wanting to shoot each other over it?
Is it possible that the root of all evil is also, somehow, the seed of our unity?
Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us.
We'll see you next time.